The sun was high over Carmel by the sea, casting long golden beams across the sidewalk of a quiet little diner. The place wasn't anything fancy, a modest roadside joint with a weathered sign that had seen better days. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of sizzling bacon as the waitresses moved swiftly between the tables, refilling cups and chatting with the regulars. At a corner booth, slouched low in his seat, sat a man who looked like he belonged anywhere but there. His boots were scuffed, his jeans had seen years of wear, and his flannel shirt bore the unmistakable creases of someone who had slept in it one too many times. His face, shaded by a weathered cowboy hat, carried the tired lines of someone who had walked a hard road. Nobody paid him much attention. After all, drifters came and went in these parts, ghosts passing through with stories no one cared to ask about. The waitress, Brenda, a woman with a kind but busy nature, hesitated before approaching him. "Coffee?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. He nodded, barely looking up, and she poured him a steaming cup. "You want anything to eat?" He hesitated, looking at the menu, then exhaled as if surrendering to reality. "Just the coffee, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble, the kind that held history in every syllable. Brenda knew the look. She had seen men like him before, hungry, but too proud to say it. At the counter, a few of the locals had started to notice him. They whispered amongst themselves, trading theories about the man's past. "Probably another broke hitchhiker," one of them murmured. "Seen plenty of 'em come through here." "Think he's one of those guys who just gave up on life?" another muttered. "Maybe. Either way, doesn't look like he can afford more than that coffee," the first man chuckled. The drifter didn't react, didn't flinch. He just took slow sips of his coffee, his hand steady, his eyes unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Then the bell above the diner door jingled, and in walked a man who commanded attention without trying. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the effortless confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was. A few of the regulars did a double-take as they recognized him. Clint Eastwood. The room shifted. People sat up a little straighter, exchanged glances, but nobody wanted to be the first to react. Eastwood wasn't just a Hollywood icon in this town. He was a local, someone they saw now and then, yet he always carried an air of quiet authority. He walked in, scanning the diner with the sharp gaze that had once stared down outlaws on the silver screen. When his eyes landed on the drifter in the corner, something flickered across his expression. Recognition, maybe. Without hesitation, he walked over to the booth and slid into the seat across from him. The entire diner went silent. Brenda clutched her coffee pot so hard her knuckles turned white. "Been a long time," Eastwood said. The drifter finally looked up. For the first time, people saw the steel in his gaze, the quiet strength behind the weary face. A smirk ghosted across his lips. "Didn't think you'd recognize me," he muttered. Eastwood let out a slow chuckle. "Hard to forget a man who saved your life." A gasp rippled through the room. The locals exchanged wide-eyed glances, suddenly desperate to know the story behind these words. Brenda finally found her voice. "You two know each other?" Eastwood nodded. "This man pulled me out of a wrecked car years ago, saved me from getting crushed when I was pinned under the dashboard. Never got to thank him properly." He turned back to the drifter. "And now I find you here, looking like you haven't had a decent meal in a while." The drifter shrugged. "Life happens." Eastwood didn't ask for an explanation. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and laid down a crisp $100 bill on the table. "Get yourself a steak, my friend." The drifter hesitated, then took a deep breath. There was no shame in accepting gratitude, no weakness in allowing an old debt to be repaid. He lifted the bill, nodded, and for the first time that day allowed himself a small smile. "Much obliged." Eastwood gave him a firm nod before standing up. And if you ever need anything," he added, "I owe you more than just a meal." With that, he tipped his hat to Brenda, then strode out of the diner, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence. Brenda, clearing her throat, turned to the drifter. "So, what'll it be, hon?" He glanced down at the money, then up at her with a twinkle in his eye. "I think I'll take that steak after all." The diner buzzed with quiet murmurs as people took in what they had just witnessed. In a world where most men walked past a drifter without a second glance, one of the biggest legends in Hollywood had seen him, had remembered him, and had repaid a kindness in the most dignified way possible. And as the drifter took his first real bite of food in days, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope